New information today about the murder of a Ferguson man who reported the alleged rape of his daughter. 3 people are accused of working together to kill him in order to keep him quiet. Lavore Harmon, Anthony L. Young, and Anthony D. Young are accused of killing and getting an associate to kill Kcoree Warren. They're also accused of killing that associate. Prosecutors say it all started with the alleged statutory rape of a 15-year-old in March. Charges were issued against Harmon in May after Warren reported the incident to police. Investigators say the 3 men had Warren killed in July when he did not accept their bribe.
On July 8, 2025, a father stood in his home in Ferguson, Missouri, believing he had done the right thing. He had reported a horrific crime. He had refused to be silenced. He had chosen justice over money. And for that choice, someone wanted him dead. Kcoree Warren wasn't a criminal. He wasn't involved in anything dangerous. He was simply a father who loved his daughter fiercely and believed that monsters should face consequences. When a man allegedly raped his 15-year-old child, Kcoree didn't hesitate. He went straight to the police. He gave his statement. He prepared to testify. Then came the offer, $12,000. Cash. All he had to do was disappear, stay quiet, let the charges vanish into thin air. $12,000 to betray his own daughter, to let a predator walk free. Kcoree Warren said no, and roughly 1 month later, bullets tore through the glass door of his home. Welcome to Dark Truth Files. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and most importantly, share this story so it reaches more amazing folks like y'all.
Kcoree Warren's best friend tells me he was the best person on earth and a great father. His family still hasn't come back home since the killing. And these 3 men are now charged, accused of working together to silence that father, murdering him, and then murdering their own hitman.
One of the most senseless acts of violence that I've reached and have seen this year.
Ferguson Police Chief Troy Doyle says Kcoree Warren's killing was calculated, cruel, and personal. On July 8th, officers say Kcoree Warren was shot through the glass door of his Ferguson home that you can still see 3 months later.
It's real good, Dad. You know, I couldn't ask for a better neighbor.
Investigators say Warren was shot after refusing a $12,000 bribe to stay quiet about charges against Lavore Harmon, accused of raping Warren's daughter. Prosecutors say Harmon, his uncle Anthony L. Young, and cousin Anthony D. Young coordinated Warren's murder with their associate, Andrew Klaus, who later that same day was also shot and killed. All 3 men now face 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed criminal action, and felonies like statutory rape.
I would have never thought something like this would happen around here.
Neighbor Hugh Deberly was home the day Warren was killed.
Next thing I know, I heard about 4 or 5 gunshots. Then I seen them running across my yard into a car, and they took off. They tried to revive him, and his kids are out there crying.
Warren's neighbors remember him as a devoted dad and friend.
Well, they took a person's life. You know, a person was trying to do right, and they killed him for it. So they should have to pay too.
This isn't just another murder case. This is about what happens when evil doesn't just commit one crime, it multiplies. When covering up becomes more important than facing accountability. When intimidation transforms into execution. Because whoever wanted Kkoree's silence didn't just want him scared. They wanted him erased. The question that haunted Ferguson Police Chief Troy Doyle was simple but chilling. How far will someone go to avoid justice? How calculated? How cruel? How personal can revenge become when someone refuses to look away from the truth? The answer arrived in blood and shattered glass on a summer evening in Missouri. Think about this for a moment. What would you do if someone offered you money, significant money, to abandon your own child, to pretend the worst thing that ever happened to them never occurred? Would you take it? Could you live with yourself? Kcoree Warren couldn't, and that decision signed his death warrant. But here's what makes this case even darker, even more disturbing. The people allegedly behind this murder weren't strangers. They were family, uncle, cousin, the accused rapist himself. 3 men, bound by blood, allegedly united by one goal: silence the witness, eliminate the threat, destroy the man who dared to seek justice. And they didn't stop at Kcoree. There was another body, another life taken, another person who knew too much, who became a liability, who had to disappear. The web of violence spun wider, darker, more twisted with each revelation. Ferguson, Missouri, a city already scarred by tragedy, already familiar with injustice, found itself facing another nightmare. But this time, it wasn't about systemic failure. It was about something primal, a father protecting his daughter, and the price he paid for refusing to be bought. The bullet that killed Kcoree Warren didn't just end one life. It shattered a family. It traumatized a community. It sent a message that anyone who heard the story would understand immediately. Some people believe witness intimidation isn't just about threats. It's about annihilation. As investigators piece together what happened, they uncover conspiracies so brazen, so ruthless, that even seasoned detectives were shaken. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. This was planned, orchestrated, executed with cold precision. And at the center of it all was a teenage girl who had already survived one nightmare, only to lose her father in another. What drives people to such darkness? What makes someone look at a protective father and see not a hero, but a problem that needs solving? How does a family, people who share DNA, who grew up together, decide that murder is a solution? Chief Doyle called it probably one of the most senseless acts of violence that our region has seen this year. But was it senseless? Or was it calculated brutality disguised as desperation? The glass door of Kcoree Warren's home still bears witness to what happened that night. The neighborhood still remembers the sound of gunfire. And somewhere in Ferguson, a teenage girl lives with the knowledge that her father died because he loved her enough to demand justice. This is the story of Kcoree Warren, a story of courage, corruption, and cold-blooded murder. A story that asks uncomfortable questions about how far evil will go when threatened with exposure. And a story that proves sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. Kcoree Warren wasn't the kind of man who sought attention or drama. He lived quietly in Ferguson, building a life centered around the people he loved most. To his neighbors, he was just a regular guy, friendly, dependable, the type who'd wave from his porch or help carry groceries if you needed a hand. But to his daughter, he was everything. Friends described Kcoree as devoted, not just present in his child's life, but genuinely invested. He showed up, he listened, he protected. In a world where too many fathers disappear or disengage, Kcoree was the opposite. He wore fatherhood like armor, like purpose, like the most important job he'd ever have. His best friend, who'd known him for years, said it simply. Kcoree was like a brother and the best person on earth. Not perfect, nobody is, but good. Genuinely, fundamentally good. The kind of person who believed in doing right even when it was hard, even when it cost him something. And in July 2025, it cost him everything. Kkoree's home on Bayview Drive was modest but filled with life. It was a place where his daughter felt safe, where family gathered, where laughter existed alongside the struggles every household faces. He worked hard to provide stability, to give his child a foundation she needed to grow into whoever she wanted to become. That foundation shattered when his 15-year-old daughter came to him with a secret she could barely speak aloud. Something horrific had happened to her. Someone had violated her in the worst way imaginable, stealing her innocence, her sense of safety, her ability to trust the world around her. Many parents would have frozen in that moment. Some would have crumbled. Others might have sought revenge outside the law, letting rage dictate their response. Kkoree did what he believed was right. He went to the police. He didn't hesitate. He didn't second guess. He walked into the Ferguson Police Department and filed a report against Laver Harmon, accusing him of raping his teenage daughter. It was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. Not because he doubted his daughter, but because he knew what would unleash. Reporting sexual assault isn't easy. It opens wounds. It invites scrutiny. It forces victims to relive trauma while strangers dissect every detail. But Kcoree believed his daughter deserved justice, and he was willing to fight for it no matter how uncomfortable, how public, how painful the process became. That's who Kcoree Warren was. A father who chose courage over comfort. But courage made him a target. When Lavor Harmon's sister, Lavonda, approached Kcoree with an envelope containing $12,000, it wasn't generosity. It was an attempt to buy his silence, to make the problem disappear, to erase the accusation before it could destroy her brother's life. $12,000 to drop the charges. $12,000 to refuse to testify. $12,000 to pretend nothing happened. Kcoree looked at that money and saw exactly what it was. A transaction where his daughter's suffering had a price tag, where justice could be purchased, where truth could be negotiated away like a business deal. He refused. Think about the weight of that decision. $12,000 isn't life-changing wealth, but it's significant. It could pay bills, reduce debt, provide breathing room in a world that constantly demands more than most people have. Accepting it would have been easy, quiet, safe. But Kcoree wasn't interested in easy or safe. He was interested in right. His friends and neighbors would later remember that about him. His unwavering sense of integrity. He didn't preach about morality or virtue. He simply lived according to principles that mattered to him. Protect your family. Stand up for the vulnerable. Don't let predators escape consequences just because they have money or connections. Captain Tim Harris from the Ferguson Police Department stayed close to the family throughout the investigation, watching them navigate unimaginable grief. He saw firsthand how Kkoree's murder didn't just end one life. It compounded the trauma his daughter had already endured, layering new nightmares onto existing wounds. She had already survived sexual assault. Now she had to survive losing her father because he tried to help her heal. Kcoree Warren deserved to grow old. He deserved to walk his daughter down the aisle someday, to meet grandchildren, to experience all the ordinary joys that make life worth living. Instead, his last act was refusing to be bought, refusing to abandon his child, refusing to let evil win without a fight. And that refusal made him expendable to people who valued self-preservation over human life. The evening of July 8, 2025, started like any other in Ferguson. Summer heat lingered in the air. Families finished dinner. Kids played outside, squeezing the last moments from daylight. On Bayview Drive, Kcoree Warren was home, a place that should have been his sanctuary, his refuge from the world's chaos. He had no idea that someone was coming for him. No idea that refusing $12,000 had marked him for execution. No idea that the glass door separating his living room from the outside world was about to become the final barrier between life and death. Somewhere in Ferguson, a plan was in motion, not a spontaneous act of rage, not a heated confrontation gone wrong. This was calculated, deliberate. A man named Andrew Klaus had been tasked with a job, and that job was murder. How do you prepare to kill someone? What goes through your mind as you drive toward their home, weapon in hand, knowing you're about to erase a human being from existence? Did Klaus think about Kkoree's daughter? Did he consider that he was about to make a child fatherless? Or had he convinced himself this was just business, just something that needed doing? We'll never know what Klaus was thinking, because he wouldn't live long enough to tell anyone. But on that July evening, he arrived at Kcoree Warren's home with a singular purpose: silence the witness. Kkoree was inside when it happened. Maybe he was watching television, talking to his daughter, scrolling through his phone, ordinary activities that make up the fabric of ordinary lives. Maybe he heard something outside, a sound that made him curious or cautious. Maybe he moved toward the door to investigate, or maybe he never saw it coming. The glass door, thin, fragile, designed to let light in and offer a view of the street, provided no protection. Klaus didn't need to force entry, didn't need to break locks or kick down barriers. He simply raised his weapon and fired through the glass. The sound must have been deafening. Glass shattering, bullets tearing through the air, the violence of it all concentrated into seconds that felt like eternity. Kkoree Warren fell in his own home, bleeding, dying, his last moments stolen by someone who saw him not as a father, not as a human being, but as a problem that needed eliminating. Neighbors heard the gunfire in a community already too familiar with violence. The sound still shocked them, still sent them scrambling for cover or peering cautiously through windows to understand what was happening. Some called 911 immediately. Others waited, frozen by fear, unsure whether stepping outside meant becoming the next target. By the time police arrived, Kcoree was gone. The man who had refused to be bought, who had stood firm in his conviction that his daughter deserved justice, had been murdered for that conviction. The scene was brutal. Blood pooled on the floor where he fell. Shattered glass glittered like cruel confetti. The door that should have protected him had become the instrument of his death, offering Klaus a clear line of sight, an easy target, a quick escape. Ferguson police responded rapidly, cordoning off the area, beginning the grim work of documenting a murder scene. But even as they collected evidence and interviewed witnesses, a darker story was unfolding across the city. Andrew Klaus, the man who allegedly pulled the trigger, wouldn't survive the night either. His body was discovered in St. Louis, not far from where he'd killed Kcoree, but far enough to suggest he'd tried to flee or had been taken somewhere specific. The details of his death remain murky, but prosecutors would later allege that the three men who orchestrated Kkoree's murder were present when Klaus died. Why kill your own shooter? Why eliminate the person who just done your dirty work? Maybe Klaus knew too much. Maybe he was a liability. Someone who could identify the people who'd hired him, who could testify against him if caught. Maybe his death was always part of the plan. Use him to kill Kkoree, then erase him to sever the connection, to eliminate the trail leading back to Laver Harmon and his family. Or maybe Klaus demanded more money, threatened to talk, became a problem himself. In the world of conspiracy and murder, loose ends get tied off quickly and permanently. A white Kia believed to belong to Klaus was found later, burned beyond recognition. Someone had torched it, destroying evidence, erasing forensic traces, making sure nothing could connect the vehicle to the crime. The burning car became a symbol of how thoroughly these men wanted to erase their tracks. Not just killing witnesses, but destroying everything associated with the murder. Back on Bayview Drive, Kkoree's family was drowning in shock and grief. His daughter, already traumatized by sexual assault, now had to process that her father died because he tried to protect her, that his love for her, his refusal to abandon her, had gotten him killed. How does a 15-year-old survive that? How does she carry the knowledge that seeking justice for what happened to her cost her father his life? Neighbors emerged from their homes as police worked the scene, standing in clusters, whispering to each other, try and make sense of senseless violence. They knew Kkoree. They'd seen him with his daughter, watched him go about his life, never imagining he was living under a death sentence. One neighbor said simply, he was just trying to do the right thing. That's what made his murder so particularly cruel, so deeply disturbing. Kcoree Warren wasn't involved in crime. He wasn't a gang member or drug dealer, wasn't living a dangerous lifestyle that increases risk of violent death. He was a father who reported a rape and refused to bribe, and for that, he was executed. The investigation that followed would reveal just how deep conspiracy went, how many people were involved, how meticulously his murder had been planned. But on July 8th, as Kkoree's body was removed from his home and neighbors stood watching in horror, one thing was already clear. Someone had decided that witness intimidation wasn't enough. Threats weren't enough. Bribery wasn't enough. They needed Kcoree Warren dead, and they made it happen. The glass door remained shattered, a silent testament to violence that shouldn't have happened, to a life stolen too soon, to a father who died protecting his daughter. Ferguson police knew immediately this wasn't random violence. Kcoree Warren hadn't been robbed. Nothing was stolen from his home. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong, or a case of mistaken identity. Someone had come to his house specifically to kill him, and investigators needed to understand why. The answer was waiting in police files, documented in a report Kkoree himself had filed weeks earlier. Laver Harmon, the man accused of raping Kkoree's 15-year-old daughter. The man whose sister had offered $12,000 to make the problem disappear. The man who now faced statutory rape and sodomy charges, crimes that could send him to prison for decades. Suddenly, motive became crystal clear. Detectives from multiple agencies, Ferguson Police, St. Louis County Police, St. Louis City Police, and the FBI converge on the investigation. Chief Troy Doyle called it collaborative work of the highest order, agencies setting aside jurisdictional boundaries because everyone understood what was at stake. Catching people who believed murder was an acceptable solution to legal problems. Laverne Harmon wasn't just facing embarrassment or social consequences. He was staring down serious prison time for sexually assaulting a minor, 3 counts of statutory sodomy, 1 count of statutory rape. These weren't charges that would vanish with a good lawyer and a sympathetic judge. These were life-altering accusations backed by a witness willing to testify, Kcoree Warren. Without Kcoree, the case weakened considerably. A traumatized 15-year-old girl testifying alone, without her father's support and corroboration, would face brutal cross-examination. Defense attorneys would attack her credibility, her memory, her motives. The prosecution's strongest witness, the protective father who'd reported the crime and refused to back down, would be gone. That's what made Kcoree dangerous to Harmon. Not his physical presence, but his testimony, his willingness to stand in court and point at the man who'd violated his daughter, his refusal to disappear no matter what incentives were offered. So Harmon allegedly decided to make him disappear permanently, but he didn't act alone. Investigators identified 2 other suspects, Anthony L. Young, Harmon's uncle, and Anthony D. Young, the uncle's son and Harmon's cousin. 3 men bound by family ties, allegedly united in conspiracy to commit murder. Why would an uncle and cousin involve themselves in such darkness? What loyalty drives someone to help plan the execution of an innocent man? Perhaps they believed protecting family meant protecting Harmon at any cost. Perhaps they saw Kcoree as a threat to their entire family's reputation. Perhaps Harmon convinced them he was innocent, that the accusations were false, that eliminating the accuser would solve everything. Or perhaps they were simply willing participants in evil, people whose moral compasses had broken long ago. The investigation revealed chilling details about how the murder was orchestrated. This wasn't 3 men getting together and spontaneously deciding to kill someone. There were discussions, planning sessions, decisions about who would pull the trigger and how they'd cover their tracks afterward. Andrew Klaus emerged as the triggerman, the person willing to stand outside Kkoree's home and fire bullets through glass. But prosecutors believed the 3 family members were the architects, the masterminds who set everything in motion. How did they recruit Klaus? What did they promise him? Money? Protection? Or was Klaus already connected to them through criminal networks that operate beneath the surface of ordinary life? The burned white Kia suggested they thought about evidence disposal. The timing of Klaus's death, the same day as Kkoree's murder, suggested they planned to eliminate him all along. These weren't amateurs stumbling through a crime. These were people who considered angles, anticipated problems, tried to create distance between themselves and the actual killing. But they made mistakes. Criminals always do. Witnesses saw things. Forensic evidence survived the cover-up attempts. Digital trails, phone records, text messages, financial transactions left breadcrumbs that investigators could follow. And perhaps most importantly, the brazenness of the crime itself drew massive law enforcement attention. When you execute someone in their home for refusing to drop rape charges, you guarantee that every available resource will be devoted to solving the case. Chief Doyle spoke about the investigation with barely contained anger. This wasn't just another homicide to him. This was an attack on the justice system itself, on the idea that witnesses should feel safe coming forward, on the principle that reporting crimes shouldn't carry a death sentence. The motive was obvious. Silence the witness, weaken the prosecution, give Harmon a chance to escape accountability for sexually assaulting a child. But the audacity of it, the willingness to commit murder rather than face trial, revealed something deeply disturbing about how these men viewed human life. Kcoree Warren's life had value only insofar as he remained silent. The moment he became an obstacle, he became expendable. As investigators built their case throughout the summer of 2025, they assembled evidence not just of murder, but of conspiracy. Phone records showing communication between the suspects around the time of the killing. Witness statements placing them in relevant locations. Forensic evidence linking them to Klaus or the crime scene. And always, hovering over everything, the bribe attempt. LaVonda Harmon offering $12,000 to make her brother's problem disappear. That alone proved the family knew about the accusations, felt threatened by them, and were willing to take illegal action to neutralize that threat. When bribery failed, they escalated to murder. The investigation also had to consider, were there others involved? Did more family members know about the plan? Were there additional conspirators who helped with logistics, provided alibis, or assisted in covering up the crime? These questions drove investigators forward, pushing them to examine every connection, every relationship, every possible link between the suspects and the murder. By October 2025, they had enough evidence, enough testimony, enough documentation to present their case to a grand jury. And that's when the indictments came down. October 2025 brought a reckoning that Ferguson had been waiting for since July. A St. Louis County grand jury convened, reviewed the mountain of evidence investigators had assembled, and delivered indictments that sent shockwaves through the community. Lavor Harmon, Anthony L. Young, Anthony D. Young. All three men faced identical charges. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of armed criminal action, and tampering with physical evidence. 6 charges each, every single one carrying the weight of premeditated, calculated violence. But here's where the case took a turn that nobody anticipated. 2 counts of first-degree murder meant 2 victims. Kcoree Warren was the obvious first victim. The father shot through his glass door, the witness they needed silenced. But the second murder charge confirmed what investigators had suspected all along. Andrew Klaus hadn't just disappeared after killing Kcoree. He'd been murdered too. The grand jury heard evidence that all 3 defendants were present when Klaus died. The man they'd allegedly recruited to pull the trigger, the person who'd carried out their dirty work, had been eliminated within hours of completing his assignment. Why does a conspiracy turn on its own members? What desperation drives people to murder their accomplice? Control. That's what it comes down to. Klaus alive was Klaus who could talk, who could negotiate, who could turn state's evidence if cornered. Klaus dead was Klaus silent forever, unable to testify, unable to connect the dots between the shooting and the men who'd orchestrated it. Except their plan had a fatal flaw. Investigators were better at their jobs than the conspirators anticipated. The burned Kia became crucial evidence despite the fire damage. Forensic teams extracted enough information to establish ownership, to place at relevant locations, to connect it to the timeline of both murders. Fire destroys evidence, but it rarely destroys everything. There are always fragments, traces, pieces that survive to tell the story. Phone records revealed communication patterns that were impossible to explain away. Why were these 3 men calling each other repeatedly on July 8th? Why did their phones ping off towers near Kkoree's home, near where Klaus's body was found, near where the Kia was discovered burning? Coincidence stretches only so far before it snaps under the weight of accumulated evidence. Witness testimony added layers to the prosecution's case. People who'd seen things, heard conversations, noticed unusual behavior in the days leading up to the murders. In criminal conspiracies, silence is fragile. Someone always talks eventually, whether out of guilt, fear, or self-preservation. The tampering with physical evidence charge spoke to their attempts at a cover-up, burning the Kia, disposing of the murder weapon, potentially cleaning crime scenes, or destroying clothing. These weren't acts of panic. These were deliberate efforts to obstruct justice, to make prosecution harder, to create reasonable doubt where none should exist. But perhaps the most damning element was the additional charge against Lavor Harmon. 3 counts of statutory sodomy and 1 count of statutory rape. The grand jury didn't just indict him for murder. They reinforced the original accusations that had started this entire nightmare. That decision carried profound significance. It told Kcoree's daughter that the system believed her, that her father's death wouldn't erase the crimes committed against her, that justice would be pursued on both fronts simultaneously. As news of the indictment spread through Ferguson, reactions split sharply. Most people felt relief that arrests had been made, that the men allegedly responsible would face trial. Finally, accountability. Finally, consequences for people who believed they could murder their way out of legal problems. But some question whether justice could ever truly be served. 3 men facing trial couldn't bring Kcoree back. Guilty verdicts wouldn't undo his daughter's trauma or restore the years stolen from her. Prison sentences, no matter how lengthy, wouldn't fill the void left by his absence. Captain Tim Harris continued supporting Kcoree's family through the legal process, watching them navigate grief compounded by ongoing legal proceedings. They had to relive the worst moments repeatedly during police interviews, grand jury testimony, and eventually trial preparation. Trauma doesn't heal on a convenient timeline. It resurfaces every time the case demands their participation. The FBI's involvement signaled how seriously federal authorities took witness intimidation cases. When someone dies for cooperating with law enforcement, it threatens the entire justice system's foundation. If witnesses believe reporting crimes means risking execution, who will come forward? How can prosecutors build cases without people willing to testify? Kcoree Warren's murder became bigger than one family's tragedy. It became a test case for whether the legal system could protect those who sought its protection, whether justice meant anything when confronted by people willing to kill to avoid accountability. First-degree murder charges indicated prosecutors believed they could prove premeditation. This wasn't manslaughter or heat-of-passion killing. This was planned, deliberate, thought-out execution. The grand jury agreed that evidence supported the highest level of murder charges available under Missouri law. Armed criminal action charges address the use of firearms during the commission of felonies. These charges carry mandatory minimum sentences in Missouri, ensuring that even if somehow the murder charges face complications, the defendants would still face serious prison time. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors began organizing their strategy. Would they try all 3 defendants together or separately? How would they present the conspiracy evidence? Which witnesses would testify? What forensic experts would explain the physical evidence? Defense attorneys, meanwhile, faced the daunting task of defending clients accused of murdering protective father and their own accomplice. What defense exists for such actions? Mistaken identity? Wrong place, wrong time? The evidence suggested otherwise, pointing directly at these 3 men as architects and participants in double homicide. The indictments weren't the end of the story. They were the beginning of a legal battle that would determine whether Kcoree Warren's killers would spend the rest of their lives in prison or somehow escape the consequences of their alleged actions. But one thing was certain: the grand jury had spoken. The evidence was substantial, and the legal system was preparing to deliver justice for a father who died protecting his daughter. As of now, Laver Harmon, Anthony L. Young, and Anthony D. Young await trial. They sit in custody, facing charges that could keep them behind bars for the rest of their lives. The wheels of justice turn slowly, grinding through pretrial motions, evidence disclosure, and the complex legal choreography that precedes murder trials. But for Kcoree Warren's family, time moves differently. Every day without him is another day of absence that can never be filled. Every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday becomes a reminder that he should be there and isn't. His daughter carries a burden no child should bear. She survived sexual assault only to lose her father because he sought justice for what happened to her. Therapy can help process trauma, but it can't erase the fundamental unfairness of her situation. That loving her and protecting her cost her father everything. The Ferguson community hasn't forgotten Kcoree. His neighbors still speak his name with respect, remembering the devoted father who lived among them. Chief Troy Doyle's words continue to resonate. This was one of the most senseless acts of violence the region had seen, a murder that struck at the heart of what it means to do right in a world that sometimes punishes goodness. Captain Tim Harris remains connected to the family, offering support as they navigate the lengthy legal process ahead. Trials take months or years to unfold. Witness preparation, jury selection, opening statements, testimony, cross-examination, closing arguments, deliberation. Each phase reopens wounds, forcing the family to relive July 8th over and over until verdicts finally arrive. The legal outcomes remain uncertain. Will all three defendants be convicted? Will juries believe the prosecution's evidence? Will defense attorneys find cracks in the case that create reasonable doubt? These questions hang unanswered, suspended in the space between indictment and verdict. But regardless of what happens in court, one truth remains unchangeable. Kcoree Warren should still be alive. He should be watching his daughter grow into a young woman. He should be offering guidance through her teenage years, celebrating her accomplishments, supporting her through challenges. He should be planning for her graduation, her future, the life she'll build despite everything she's endured. Instead, he's gone. Murdered for refusing to betray his child. Killed for believing justice mattered more than money. Executed for standing firm when evil demanded he look away. What does this story teach us? That courage carries costs. That doing right doesn't guarantee safety. That predators will go to horrifying lengths to avoid accountability. That witness protection isn't just a procedural concern. It's literally the difference between life and death for people brave enough to report crimes. Kcoree Warren's murder exposes uncomfortable realities about how fragile safety can be, how quickly intimidation escalates to violence, how family loyalty can twist into conspiracy. His death demands we ask harder questions about protecting those who cooperate with law enforcement, about ensuring justice doesn't require martyrdom. His best friend said Kcoree was the best person on earth. His neighbors called him devoted. His community recognized him as someone simply trying to do right by his daughter. These aren't extraordinary qualities. They're fundamental human decency. Yet decency got him killed. The trial ahead will determine legal guilt. Juries will decide whether Lavor Harmon, Anthony L. Young, and Anthony D. Young orchestrated Kkoree's murder. Judges will impose sentences if convictions occur. The machinery of justice will process this case according to laws and procedures designed to ensure fairness. But no verdict will bring Kkoree back. No sentence will undo his daughter's trauma. No legal outcome will restore what was stolen on July 8, 2025. Still, justice matters. Not because it heals all wounds or reverses tragedy, but because it affirms that some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. That murdering witnesses isn't acceptable. That sexual predators cannot eliminate accusers to avoid prosecution. That conspiracy to commit murder deserves society's harshest punishment. Kcoree Warren deserved better than the world gave him. He deserved a justice system that could protect him after he came forward. He deserved to live long enough to see his daughter heal. He deserved to grow old in peace, surrounded by family who loved him. Instead, he became a martyr to the principle that truth matters more than self-preservation. Rest in peace, Kcoree Warren. You were loved. You mattered. Your courage won't be forgotten, and your daughter will carry your strength forward even through her pain. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Kkoree's position? How do we better protect witnesses who come forward? Share your perspective below. And remember to subscribe for more real stories that demand we pay attention.